We are going to focus on our characters and what the author tells us about those characters. Now, we've done this before. We did this in Frankenstein when dealing with direct and indirect characterization, okay? But here's the deal. Just because you did it in that story doesn't mean you can do it again in this story. Although I believe indirect characterization in this story is easier. It's actually easier than direct, which direct is the easiest. Direct is when you take something straight from the text and apply it to that character. So if it's said, in this case, it does say, but it's not one of our characters, so I'm not giving an answer in this case. Does anybody remember what it said about the old fakir over in India? What type of person he was? A holy man. So that is a direct quote about the old fakir. We would use that as a direct characterization about the fakir. But since it's not one of our characters, we have to do the same thing for Mr. White, Mrs. White, Herbert White, and Sergeant Major Morris. I can tell you right now there is a direct quote about Sergeant Major Morris. It is 100% in black and white. You cannot miss it. Okay? But there's also very good indirect inferences that you can make about all of the characters based on the information we have. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but I talked about a character named Mikey. Mikey had worn out shoes, holes in his socks, jeans that were 2 inches too short, and a shirt that it was all worn and faded. And we came up with the idea, we inferred that that character was poor, which is a fine inference to make. And we stated this character is poor because of these things. He cannot afford new shoes, new socks, new jeans, new t-shirt. Because they can't afford that, they're probably poor. That's the inference that we make. And we recognize it as an inference. However, if that is an indirect characterization. However, if the author said, despite those things, Mikey was a kind and sweet soul and loved everybody, that would be a direct quote or a direct characterization straight from the story. So now we've put this one is direct, it's taken straight from the story. This one is still taken from the story, but it's not direct. It's something that I as the reader had to infer. Okay? And we're going to do that today. So inside your Google Classroom, you have the story, The Monkey's Paw. Try to pull that up. Then you also have direct and indirect characterization. Pull that one up as well. Now listen, there's two ways you can do this. You can do a split screen, which I find easier, or you can just have those two tabs open, which that works. So you have tab number 1 is the story, tab number 2 is direct and indirect, and you just toggle between the two, which I'm fine with. Either way, though, we have to know what direct characterization is and indirect characterization is. Would it be possible for me to say Mr. White was a rude curmudgeon of an old man? I don't think we can say that. We cannot say that because he invites his guest in. He was expecting this guest. He was waiting for this guest. He wanted this guest to come in. So therefore, we can't say he's a curmudgeon of an old man who doesn't care about anybody because he wanted that person to come to their house. He invited them. And when they came, they fed them, gave them something to drink, let them sit by the fire. That's something that a nice person does. So here's what's going to happen. As we unfold or unpackage this direct and indirect characterization, we're going to need the story in front of us, and we're going to need that worksheet from Google Classroom. As we go through this, we're going to sort of do it in pieces. And I'm going to give you guys have the advantage of first and second period already being done. They gave me their answers. And as I walk around and I think to myself, if a 8th grader in first period can see this, then an 8th grader in third period can see this. If an 8th grader in second period can see this, then my other classes can see it too. And that's important, okay? So I don't want you to think I'm making up these answers. I came up with them, and then you look at me and say, well, of course you can, Mr. Neiman. You've done this before, or you've had more experience than us in this. That is true, which is why I steal from the kids. I steal their answers because I didn't tell them what to say. They came up with it on their own.